Thank you, thank you, thank you. Welcome. This is another great show, real relevant. Leo nimevaa hood. Nimeambiwa kuna baridi sana eh. So leo nimejikakamua, nikaamua. And today we're gonna speak about stress amongst teenagers. Hii ni due to public demand. Nilielezwa sana ya kwamba matini either wana stress wazazi, nao wako stressed juu ya wazazi. I don't know who will help each other, because when you speak to the parents' generation, they are complaining about teenagers. When you speak to the teenagers, hey, they are complaining about the parents. Ni kubaya. But let's look at stress amongst teenagers. We live in a generation where one generation is blaming the other generation. The digital generation is blaming the analog generation. The analog generation is blaming the digital generation. And the digital generation have siblings. And these siblings, they are being blamed also. I always tell people, get to your phone, get to the selfie. Look at that guy. That is the person who has birthed this current generation. And so with all this, then we have teenagers who are confused, because why we have a generation, a father generation, or a grandfather generation, and a father generation, and the next generation, is so that one generation may help the other generation to fight through and to overcome the storms of life. And so we have a generation of teenagers who are stressed up. What are the causes of stress? Number one, we have a parenting crop that is never present. Never present at home. Never giving time. They are busy looking for money. They are busy chasing their dreams. They are busy building themselves to be better version of themselves, including going to church so many times. And I'm not against going to church so many times, because it is also equals to not giving these guys time. And so we have a parenting generation that is not there for them. And so what is it that happens to this child? This child is looking for affection, looking for the father's voice. But the voice is not there. The affection of the mother is not there. And so the child is left with so many questions. And why I'm talking about so many questions is because I know that the investment the parents are doing, they invest in gadgets, PS, TVs, movies, all these channels, DS, internet, Wi-Fi, so that the child can access anything that they want. This visual generation is watching all these things. They have questions that needs to be answered, because why one generation is supposed to sit with another generation. Like even what God says, come, let us listen together. Why we need to sit down is because we need to answer questions, because every generation is driven by questions and curiosity. And so the generation of teens have got so many questions that needs to be answered. But nobody is there to answer them. So the teens generation is left with only to stay with their questions and always ask, what is it that we did to our parents that they don't come home to listen to us? Another thing that is causing these guys to be in stress is the aspect of over-expectation. As the generation is being exposed to what is happening in the globe rather, then the over-expectation is rising up, because we see models of what happens in families, maybe in the modern world, that triggers this child to ask themselves, why is my dad not doing like I have seen in the cartoon? Why is my dad not doing like I have seen in the movies? And so we have a generation of kids who have over expectations. And that puts them into stress because they can't understand. If I watched into that movie, I saw that dad doing this to their son. Why is my dad not doing it to myself? What about a lot of confusion in this generation? I know we live in a generation where people are talking of alternative information, alternative wisdom, alternative everything. And so, from a parenting point of view or opinion, there is an opinion being driven by the parents. But from the media perspective, from the technology perspective, there's an opinion being propagated. And so the child is left between the cliff without understanding which is better. Now, when you look at what the parent is saying, it seems right, but also what is being propagated on a daily basis, 26 hours per day. It seems that is bombarding in their minds more and more. And so confusion comes, whereby you don't know whether to follow your parents or to follow what is basically being thrown out. So confusion is another thing that is causing this current generation to be stressed. A lot of information overload. Unlike generations in the past, this is a generation that has a lot of information overload. Anything that you need today. I remember when I was growing up, we could be told, don't go buy this kind of a tape, don't go buy this kind of a cassette. But the cassettes are no longer in the market. And so what is happening is information is in the air. And depending on the site that you're looking for, then there's a probability of information getting overloaded in your brain and in your mind. And you see a generation of stressed teenagers with so much information against the information that they hear from the physical, face-to-face conversation. And so the argument is what I'm hearing versus what I have seen and watched. And a generation that also uplifts role models that are not right, that are negative, that are pushing for negative virtues, negative values. A generation where the good models, good role models, they're not willing to roll up their sleeves, dirty themselves as they fight to their positions of influence so that they can challenge and encourage other people and inspire people positively. So maybe by the look of things, we might be fighting drugs. But then when you look at what is happening, is that it's like drug barons and drug warlords and all these guys, they are the models in the society. And so a generation that listens to us talk about positivity, a generation that listens to us talk against these vices, also is watching a lot of these guys looking like they are the most successful people. And so the generation is left in a gap of dilemma, not able to understand what next. How should I stand to make it in life? And even the space, like I'm a psychologist and many times I've been invited to speak about masturbation. But you look at the information online and the information I'm giving. I might be giving the right information, but it's going to safeguard and help this generation not to be destroyed out of masturbation. But then the information outside there, the information in the online, full, packed, and over 75% of the content online is supporting masturbation and talking about the benefits, talking about how it helps. And so we have a generation that is put to information that really pushes them away from the values they stand for. And this generation also is stressed by the number of dysfunctional families, families that are not working. I've gone to schools whereby you hear children ask, where is my dad? And when the mother is asked about where the dad is, the mother is mad, jumping all over. Usiniulize kuhusu babako. Sijui aligongwa na lori. And the mzee is sound and walking and doing some nice stuff. The child wants to connect with the father, but the mother is a barrier. And so a dysfunctional family setup, people who come from families that don't work, don't function well, people who come from domestic violence, people who come from people who don't understand what are the key values, a lot of aggression because of what they're coming from or where they're coming from. And so we have a generation that needs to walk the journey out of stress. Stress of what the future holds. Teenagers who stand out and they see people who have graduated, people who have done all that they were required to do, and they are not succeeding. And so the teenagers are stressed. What will the future hold for me? Teenagers whose aspect of life is so guarded by what they feel and they think. Just the other day we talked about guys, lovers killing each other. And so teenagers are looking at themselves, and they're looking at themselves as young adults. They're looking at themselves as people who are going to get into marriage, and they're asking if so-and-so killed themselves, will really marriage work? And so all these things happening in this generation sums up and narrows down to today's language. A language that is so condemnational. I don't know whether that's an English word. Or a language that is full of condemnation. A language that is full of failure. A language that is telling you, you can't make it. And a language that presents a world that is destroyed. A world that doesn't have hope. So this leaves teenagers hopeless. This leaves teenagers with an aspect of dilemma. And so we have teenagers in dilemma. But we also have parents in dilemma who are looking towards their teenagers and feeling, are these guys making it? Will these guys make a stand? Because also the other thing, maybe the last thing about the current teenagers is they know and they read in their biology class or their science class that God created male and female. But today we talk about orientation. We talk about sex orientation. And guys are being asked, what orientation are you? They're not asked, what gender are you? But what orientation? And so the orientation versus what was created causes a confusion. Because I will ask myself, am I male or female? Let's go for a short break, come back and continue.